We are the ministry of the real truth, and today we are looking into, or at, the said original ancient very old language, or languages, spoken by the first Hebrews, and then the Israelites, the Jews, modern Jews today. Written of in the original ancient very old Tab Asher, or Aramaic, the square script, from the said old sacred scribal language God spoke to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the Lishana Atika Sabra. And this has been translated into the nearest English equivalent by the native-born Aramaic-speaking translator from Mesopotamia, Syria, Victor Nimrod Alexander. And he has had up to 30 years experience in translating these Old Testament manuscripts, as well as the Galilean Aramaic New Testament manuscripts, given these particular texts given by Thomas the disciple to the original ancient apostolic church of the East, which he founded, along with the help of Bartholomew, Thaddeus, and Mary of the 70, and they established it by the 2nd century apparently. But it has come to our attention, or we have noticed, two or more elements or claimants who are stating that they are the descendants of these peoples, or latter descendants, the Israelites, the Hebrews, etc. Chiefly the Israelites, Jacob's or Jacob's descendants. So we ask, who is right in their claims? Who can be proven beyond a doubt to be the true Hebrews or Israelites or Jews, with the correct translation through the correct language used or spoken today? Who is telling the truth and who is well misinformed or lying? One in particular says the said or claiming are the original Hebrews Israelites descendants, where the other may not be, which may be found doing so. There's two claimants making the same claim. So, obviously, using common sense and logic, two can't be the one, but if two has merged as one originally, way back in a long past millennium, then let us set about to prove which one is the original descendant and which one isn't. Keep in mind, in the era of the said original Hebrews, in their eon, or that period that they thrived in, the earth may have been one giant landmass with no country names given as we know them today, but instead having territories, names from tribes or people who occupied or invaded and occupied certain Near Eastern or Middle Eastern geographical locations. At that time there may not have been any great seas which were yet formed to divide land mass, as the tectonic plates had not yet rubbed up against each other, causing a massive earthquake, which in turn caused volcanic eruptions, leading to lava flowing, creating thick layers of crust, etc. So, and obviously divisions between lands like we have today. So the entire Near East may have been Africa as we know it. And Africa, the entire Near East, much later, at a later millennium wise, given names by certain peoples of a certain civilization, i.e. the ancient Hellenes or Greeks, or even Romans, who gave those invaded locations or regions names in accordance with the people found occupying them, whether they were indigenous or not. Those who spoke a certain language that therefore their long dead forefathers spoke, i.e. the Aramaeans, were so named as they were said to have continued the language spoken by their forefather Aram, as seen in the book of Genesis and the list of descendants of Noah, etc. An end prefix or suffix was added at some point in time, so it became known as Aramaic. The end ik is what we're pointing to. The prefix or suffix, end suffix, meant that the people discovered occupying this region spoke a certain language, so they possessed it. It belonged to them. Therefore it belonged to them. They were the possessors of it. Or the Asians, this is another example, or the Asians or Chinese, etc., as we know them, had a language, a certain language. They possessed. Therefore it was theirs. It belonged to them. So were aptly named and known as Asiatics in this sense today. For today we say the Chinese are Asians who way back in time dwelt in the Asian provinces, portions of Europe known as China, Japan, Korea, etc. So let's look back into the two peoples claiming to be the true descendants of the original ancient Hebrews, the Israelites, the Jews, etc. We found a few websites with claims to fame, these two factions, these two lots of people, in regard to the original ancient, very old Hebrews, Israelites, African Hebrew, Israelite origins, etc. Now, keep in mind though, that one or both may have lost their origin identity. Where did they originally come from? Therefore, are trying to fill a void, an empty void, trying to recover, trying to figure out where they originated from. So they're assimilating some other people's origins, culture, history, religion, language and traditions, and totally fabricating all the details. Now you, the viewer, listener to this video, must decide who truly is who they claim to be via the presented facts as established facts, the evidence that proves itself evident, and the comparisons we'll use in using the original ancient very old Tab Asherit manuscripts hand copied by scribes and monks in Urhai, now modern Edessa, now modern Turkey, which has been said to be the sister language of the original ancient very old yet long dead language. It's not written or spoken anymore. It's a modern version, a modern vernacular, okay, you have today, which is said to be the Hebrew, etc. The Tav Ivri, or Hebrew, without the added vowels to the consonants. This is prior, way prior, before these vowels were added to the consonants and these points, these vowel points, etc. And modifications, if any, of the, say, we've got to point to one, there may be several, but the major one is the Masoretic text, or the text of the Masoretes. As the Tav Asherit and Tav Ivri, and also the Tav Hotep, were originally sister languages, with the same words, same meanings, until vowels were later added, vowel points, etc. We're not too sure what the Hebrew word is in, well, not the word is in Hebrew. It might be nukta. We may have got the Arab word for it, because they have very similar, which not only changed the structure of the language, or the languages, but also the meaning of the original words between the two. In the Aramaic, for example, Yuma, Y-U-M-A, in the original ancient Tab Asher or Aramaic Brita, which when translated into the nearest English equivalent means immeasurable or fathomable period, era, age, eon or day, with a capital D. That's in the original Tab Asher Brita, or as you know it in the English, Genesis. Okay, so Yuma means immeasurable or unfathomable period, era, age, eon or day with a capital D. We actually came across a Christian apologist years and years ago who said the same thing. It meant he didn't use the word Yuma or anything. He just said it was an immeasurable or unfathomable period where God created. Nobody was there. No man had yet been created to write it down, to record it when God started and when he ended, or when the creation ended. So man assumes, okay, according to those texts, that it was all done in 6 literal days. Okay, so there's the Brita, Aramaic word, day, built with a capital D, and Yom, Y-O-M, in the Hebrew, which means day with a little d. Day is an hour day of the week, as we know it, understand it. Today's Israeli Hebrew is said to be a revised, or revision, in the early 1900s of the Canaanite, or Ugaritic language of the biblical Canaanites, etc., who were pagans, who worshipped idols, like El, E-L, Baal, etc. And the Hebrews who entered their land, okay, promised to them by God, promised to Abraham by God, adopted and wrongly scripted the true name of God, which is El, E-I-L, wrongly as El, the God of thunder, apparently, of the pagans, using it today as El, as an Elohim. The, which is the article the, God with capital G, or gods, small g. So let's have a look at these websites that we've come across. You may have noticed here that we came across one that is Rastafari oriented, and it reads, according to this, Kafa Kudzo Zereki, how Ivri became Hebrew. How Ivri became Hebrew. The Israelites wrote their name in their language with the letters. He's got question marks. He's probably unsure. Or it's a mistake. The letters VRI represent, again, question marks in English. So he's not too sure of himself by the looks of it. That's the indication we get. The letters IVRI represent, in English, in the original tongue, used to write the Bible. That'd either be, well, it's talking about the Tab Ivri here, right? The word the letters represent is pronounced Över, or Över, with an H on the end, right? Probably Över. A direct translation of the name of the ancient Israelites will read Ivri, pronounced Över. However, in time, this true name of the Israelites took a back seat. What replaced the name of the Israelites is a great departure from the truth, according to this person. Right? To make matters worse, the name Hebrew comes from a double translation from the original name. And he goes on to say, let him explain what he meant by all of that. What he means by all of that. The name Hebrew is the English translation of the name pronounced Över from Latin. That means the first translation of the name of the Israelites into Latin was the first step. The first step dropped and lost the proper pronunciation of Över. With the proper pronunciation lost in translation, in came the second step, which is the new Latin names translation into what we have now. The confusion came about this way, according to this person. From the time of the Abraham, Until the time of Jesus Christ, the world knew the Israelites as, it's got question marks there, Ervet. In time, during the time of Christ, 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire ruled what is called the Middle East, or the Near East. Judea, the home of the Israelites, became a province of the Roman Empire. The national language of the Roman Empire was Latin. Therefore, all the literature people wrote and read was in Latin. Okay, but there were people there who spoke Italian, but the major was Latin. Available books not originally written in Latin were all translated into it. So Latin is the language that all the others came from, i.e. Italian, Spanish and French. So if you can learn one, become fluent in one, you should be able to understand speakers of the other two. So if you learn Italian, you should be able to understand what a Frenchman or a Spanish person utters. Included in these translations were the Hebrew scriptures, and question marks again, translated into Latin became Hebraicus. However, as you can see yourself, how you pronounce Hebraicus is nowhere near pronunciation of Ervet. For the next 1,000 years, Latin was the dominant language in Christendom, and the Latin translation of the Bible was the de facto book. So it's like a secondary book, right? So, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. The Reformation in Europe, led by Martin Luther, changed the status quo. Before then, only the small educated minority that read Latin knew of what was in the scriptures. That's true, because they didn't want the people learning it. They kept them dumb, so they wouldn't know what was actually contained in it. Then they'd deceive them by saying, your parents or whatever died, your family died, they're in purgatory, in between heaven and hell, pay us some money so that they can move on. Pay us penance, etc., for your sins and all this sort of stuff. They're making a lot of money off the people, right? The Reformation in Europe, led by Martin Luther, changed the status quo. Before then, only the small educated minority that read Latin knew of what was in the scriptures. After the Reformation, translation of the Bible began in other European languages, including English. This opened up an unprecedented access of biblical information to anyone who could read his or her local language. So, when Martin Luther, the supposed father of the Reformation, translated from the old Germanic, because he was a German, right, into the Latin, or the other way around, he realized that there was a whole lot of dogma, incorrect doctrines, etc., and practices that the Roman Catholic Church were doing. So he yelled, "Reform! You need to reform!" And then others followed suit, like Wycliffe, Tyndale, etc. The Reformation in Europe, led by Martin Luther, changed the status quo. Before then, only a small educated minority that read Latin knew of what was in the scriptures. After the Reformation, translation of the Bible began in other European languages, including English. This opened up, so yeah, that was translated into Old Middle English, right? This opened up an unprecedented access of biblical information to anyone who could read his or her local language. However, there was a problem. All these translations were taken from the Latin version instead of the original language. Therefore, instead of using the original name Ivri or Erver, according to this person, the translated Latin name Hebraicus carried into the European languages, which included English. The name Hebrew is the result of translating the Latin Hebraicus into English. Thus, the name Hebrew is the result of a double translation of the original name, question mark there, lots of question marks, Erver. Had the translation been from the original text with the name, and lots of question marks again, you'd never have heard the name Hebrew. Instead, the proper name Erver is what people will know as the name of the Israelites. Well, it's actually not. It's the Ivri is Okay, it's not the name of the Hebrew. It may have been used for the Israelites later on. Yeah, okay. So there you have it. The proper pronunciation in the native language of the ancient Israelites, designation commonly known as Hebrew, in English is Ivri. Maybe Hebrew wasn't actually a language. It was just a whole lot of people that migrated to another land or geographical location. Maybe. Okay, so there you have it. The proper pronunciation in the native language of the ancient Israelites, designation commonly known as Hebrew in English is Ivri, pronounced ver. Because most modern Bibles are direct translations or carbon copies of the Latin translation, true, down through the millenniums, the centuries, translated by Roman Catholic scribes, monks like Martin Luther, Wycliffe, etc. Even though they are known as Protestants or Protestants, they become Protestants later on when they separated from the Roman Catholic Church and started up on their own. So in that time they were Protestants because they are protesting against the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, the Pope, and saying, hey, you need to make a reform, you need to make changes. Because most modern Bibles are direct translations or carbon copies of the Latin translation, the result is all modern Bibles carry the name Hebrew. And these are all modern Americanized English Bible versions, which all stem from these translations from the Roman Catholic Church Fathers right down to this very day, and are pumped out by, printed and published and pumped out through the American Bible societies and similar. So lots and lots and lots of these street preachers, etc., are preaching from a Roman Catholic translation, a copy of copies of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of copies, etc. Okay, it's not from the original manuscripts. It's from revisions, translations, supposedly from the original ancient long dead languages, no longer written or spoken. So they must have had a certain method to do that they followed to be able to do that.